The morning shift at New Geneva Station buzzed with typical interstellar commerce. Massive cargo haulers from the Andromedian sectors unloaded precious metals while sleek diplomatic vessels from the core worlds refueled for their next journey. The station's artificial gravity hummed beneath the feet of dozens of species going about their daily business. Officer Thak adjusted his tactical vest, the scales on his reptilian neck glistening under the harsh station lighting. His partner, Greg, stood beside him, both Valorians scanning the docking bays with predatory eyes. Their species had earned their reputation as efficient security forces throughout the galaxy, though their methods often left much to be desired. "Look at Bay 47, Thak muttered, pointing a clawed finger toward a modest transport vessel settling onto the landing platform. The ship was nothing special, a basic civilian model that thousands of beings used for short-range travel between systems. No fancy diplomatic markings, no military escort, just a simple white hull with standard navigation lights. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, they watched a young human woman emerge from the airlock. She moved with quiet confidence, her black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her clothing was unremarkable, dark pants, a simple jacket, and worn boots that suggested she'd seen plenty of travel. "Another human drifter," Thak hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the recycled air. His scaled face twisted with the same expression he wore when discussing vermin infestations. "Look at her, probably smuggling contraband or running from debts." Grex nodded, his yellow eyes narrowing. Both officers had developed a particular distaste for humans over their years of service. In their view, the soft-skinned species was too emotional, too idealistic, and far too willing to interfere in affairs that didn't concern them. The fact that humans had somehow earned respect among other galactic civilizations only made the Valorians more resentful. The woman seemed unaware of their scrutiny as she performed her post-flight checks. She moved methodically around her vessel, examining the landing struts and running diagnostics on various systems. Her movements were precise, professional, not the hurried, nervous behavior they expected from someone with something to hide. "She's trying too hard to look innocent," Grex observed, adjusting his weapon belt. "Classic smuggler behavior. They always overcompensate." "Exactly," Thak agreed. "Time to show this soft skin how real security works." They approached Bay 47 with the swagger that came naturally to their species. Their heavy boots echoed against the metal decking, causing several nearby aliens to step aside and lower their gazes. Valorians commanded respect through intimidation, and they wore that reputation like armor. The human woman noticed their approach and straightened, reaching into her jacket. Both officers tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their sidearms, but she only produced a small identification wallet. "Good morning, officers," she said in perfect standard galactic, her voice calm and respectful. "I'm Lee Minar, Terran citizen. I've just arrived from the Kepler system, and I'm here on official business." Her tone was polite but not subservient. She held herself with quiet dignity, meeting their gaze without challenge or fear. This only served to irritate the Valorian officers further. Humans who didn't show proper deference were particularly galling. Grex snatched the ID card from her extended hand without bothering to examine it properly. The small device contained biometric data, travel authorization codes, and security clearances, but he barely glanced at the holographic display before dismissing it. "Sure you are, soft skin," he sneered, using the derogatory term his species favored for humans. "Official business, that's what they all say. We're conducting a full vessel search. Step aside and keep your mouth shut." Minar's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in her dark eyes. "Officers, I'd prefer if you contacted the Terran Embassy first. My credentials should verify my status and—" "Don't tell us how to do our job," Thak interrupted, his voice rising to attract attention from nearby beings. He deliberately invaded her personal space, using his superior height and bulk to intimidate. Humans always think they know better than everyone else, always sticking your noses where they don't belong. The young woman took a measured step back, not from fear, but from calculated diplomacy. Her hands remained visible, her posture non-threatening. Yet there was something in her bearing that suggested she was far from helpless. "I'm simply trying to follow proper protocol," she said evenly. If you'll just verify my documentation through official channels, the only protocol here is what we say it is, Grex growled, shouldering past her toward the ship's airlock. This is Valorian jurisdiction, and we don't need permission from some human bureaucrats to do our jobs. As the two officers forced their way aboard her vessel, Minar watched silently. Her calm demeanor never wavered, but those who knew how to read such things might have noticed the subtle shift in her stance, the way her weight settled, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of her spine. She was no longer just observing the situation, she was evaluating it. Inside Minar's transport vessel, the two Valorian officers began their so-called inspection with the subtlety of a meteor strike. Thak ripped open storage compartments, while Grex overturned furniture and scattered belongings across the small cabin floor. What should have been a professional search quickly devolved into deliberate destruction. "Look at all this fancy human junk," Grex sneered, throwing aside a carefully packed case of scientific instruments. The delicate equipment clattered against the bulkhead, several pieces cracking from the impact. Probably stolen from some real civilization, Minar stepped into the airlock threshold, watching the systematic vandalism of her personal space. Her quarters were modest but well organized. A few changes of clothes, some books, personal mementos from her travels across the galaxy. Each item told a story of diplomatic missions, peace negotiations, and bridges built between hostile species. "Please," she said, her voice maintaining its calm tone, even as Thak deliberately crushed a small holographic projector under his boot. "You're damaging official equipment. I really must insist you verify my status through proper channels before—" "Shut up!" Grex barked, whirling around to face her. His yellow eyes blazed with fury that seemed far out of proportion to the situation. Typical human arrogance. You think you're special because your species makes friends with everyone. Newsflash, soft skin. Not everyone wants to hold hands and sing songs about peace. By now the commotion had drawn attention throughout the docking bay. A four-armed Centaurian trader paused in loading his cargo, his multiple eyes focused on the scene unfolding at Bay 47. He whispered to his blue-skinned companion, "Those officers are being unusually harsh, even for Valorians." The companion, a female Andorian with silver antennae, shook her head sadly. "I've seen Valorian searches before, but this feels different, more personal somehow." Other beings began gathering at a respectful distance. A group of insectoid Mantari clicked their mandibles in what passed for their species' expression of disapproval. Two tall ethereal Arcturians simply observed with their large, knowing eyes, their telepathic abilities likely picking up the emotional undercurrents flowing. Between the three participants, several beings discreetly activated their personal recording devices. In an age of interstellar communication, incidents like this could spread across multiple star systems within hours. The footage would be uploaded to galactic news networks, social platforms, and diplomatic channels faster than any official report could suppress it. Inside the ship, Minar's onboard artificial intelligence detected the aggressive intrusion and attempted to initiate emergency protocols. The AI, a sophisticated system named Arya, tried to send a priority distress signal to the Terran embassy on the station's upper levels. But Thak had come prepared. He activated a military-grade communications jammer, a device that should have required special authorization to use in civilian areas. The electronic warfare equipment filled the small cabin with a low humming sound as it blocked all outgoing transmissions. "No calling for help, human," Thak said with satisfaction, watching the ship's communication panel flash red warning lights. "We run this station, and we decide when this search is finished." Arya's holographic avatar flickered into existence, a small, blue-tinted projection of a human woman. "Commander Lee," the AI said, its voice distorted by the jamming field, "I cannot establish contact with... Systems are being... interference detected." The projection sputtered and vanished as the jammer's power overwhelmed the ship's internal systems. Minar's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. For the first time since the encounter began, a crack appeared in her diplomatic composure. Not fear or anger, but something colder, calculation. Grex continued his destructive rampage, now focused on her personal belongings. He found a small wooden box, containing what appeared to be gifts and mementos from various worlds. Without hesitation, he dumped the contents onto the floor. A delicate crystal sculpture from the ice moons of Vega shattered against the metal. Deck! A hand-woven tapestry from the desert nomads of Kepler 442b was torn as he kicked through the pile. "Look at this," Grex laughed, holding up a child's drawing. It showed stick figures of different alien species, holding hands under a rainbow, clearly a gift from some young being she'd encountered during her travels. How touching. The human collects friendship pictures. He crumpled the artwork deliberately, maintaining eye contact with Minna as he destroyed it. The watching crowd outside grew larger and more diverse. A massive Gorvani engineer, his rocky hide scarred from years in asteroid mining operations, growled deep in his throat. Even his violent species considered such wanton destruction dishonorable. "This isn't right," muttered a small, furry Felinian merchant. "Valorians are harsh, but this is something else entirely." Minna watched it all with growing stillness. Her dark eyes tracked every broken item, every deliberate act of destruction, every moment of calculated cruelty. She said nothing, but those who knew how to read the subtle signs of human body language might have noticed the almost imperceptible changes. The way her breathing became controlled and measured, how her hands relaxed completely at her sides, the slight forward tilt of her head that suggested intense focus. She was no longer just enduring the search. She was memorizing every detail, cataloging every violation of protocol, building a case that would echo through diplomatic channels across the galaxy. The storm was gathering, and the Valorian officers had no idea what they had unleashed. The cargo hold of Minna's modest transport vessel contained what appeared to be standard traveling supplies, spare parts for the ship, emergency rations, basic tools for repairs. But as Thak and Grex continued their destructive search, they stumbled upon something that would change everything. Hidden beneath a false panel in the deck plating, Grex's claws scraped against something metallic. "There's a compartment here," he called out, prying at the edges until the panel gave way with a pneumatic hiss. Inside lay a sealed military case, its surface gleaming with an almost mirror-like finish. The container was clearly not standard civilian equipment. It bore the distinctive hexagonal pattern of military-grade armor plating and was secured with multiple biometric locks that glowed with soft blue light. "Now we're getting somewhere," Thak hissed with satisfaction. "Smuggling military hardware, that's a Class A violation right there." The case was surprisingly heavy as they hauled it out of its concealment. Advanced polymer construction made it nearly indestructible, designed to survive everything from explosive decompression to direct energy weapon hits. Whatever was inside, someone had gone to great lengths to protect it. Grex ran his scanner over the surface, trying to identify the contents. The readings made no sense. The equipment inside was registering energy signatures unlike anything in their database. "The scanner can't identify half this stuff," he muttered. "Probably black market tech from the Outer Rim," Thak speculated. "Or worse, stolen military prototypes." The biometric locks proved surprisingly easy to bypass. Minna had apparently programmed them to recognize any official law enforcement scan, a detail that should have given the officers pause. Instead, they were too focused on their discovery to wonder why a smuggler would make their contraband so accessible to authorities. The case opened with another soft hiss, revealing contents that made both Valorians step back in surprise. Instead of weapons or illegal technology, they found themselves looking at the most sophisticated diplomatic and military communication equipment they'd ever seen. Advanced tactical gear lay nestled in custom foam, body armor that seemed to shift and adapt even while inactive, emergency medical supplies that incorporated nanotechnology, and survival equipment designed for operations in hostile environments across multiple star systems. But it was the array of communication devices that truly caught their attention. A quantum entanglement communicator capable of instantaneous contact across galactic distances, emergency beacons that could summon diplomatic vessels or military escorts. Most impressive was a crystalline device that pulsed with its own internal light, clearly technology far beyond what either Valorian had ever encountered. "What is this?" Thak demanded, holding up the mysterious device. His scaled hands trembled slightly as unknown energy patterns danced across its surface. The crystal responded to his touch, projecting holographic symbols neither officer could. Red Minna had followed them into the cargo hold, maintaining her composed distance as they violated her private storage. But now, seeing her most sensitive equipment exposed and mishandled, something fundamental shifted in her demeanor. She straightened, and suddenly the young woman who had seemed so vulnerable moments before was gone. In her place stood someone who carried herself with unmistakable authority, whose very presence seemed to fill the small cargo space. "That is a Galactic Defense Council emergency beacon," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Every word carried weight, each syllable precisely measured. "And my name is Commander Lee Minna, Special Envoy to the Outer Rim Treaties and architect of the Valorian Human Peace Accords." The transformation was stunning. Gone was the polite, deferential civilian they had been bullying. This was someone accustomed to command, someone who had faced down warlords and negotiated with species that considered violence their first language of diplomacy. Both officers froze, as if struck by lightning. The beacon in Thak's hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 kilograms. Grex's scaled hands began to tremble as he truly looked at the equipment for the first time, not as contraband, but as the tools of someone who operated at the highest levels of galactic politics. Grex's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You're the Peacemaker." The title hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Across 12 star systems, the name Peacemaker was spoken with reverence, fear, or hatred, depending on which side of her negotiations you had found yourself. She was the human who had walked into impossible situations and somehow found solutions that avoided bloodshed. The same Commander Lee who negotiated your species' trade agreements with 12 other worlds, Minna confirmed, her voice now carrying unmistakable authority that made both officers unconsciously step back. "The same person whose work has kept your colonies in the Rigel system supplied with essential resources for the past 3 years." The implications hit them like a starship's gravitational wake. Every Valorian knew about the resource crisis of 3 years ago, when their mining colonies had faced starvation after supply routes were cut during territorial disputes. Their government had been preparing for war, ready to take what they needed by force, when a human diplomat had appeared with an alternative. She had convinced the Andromedian Consortium to open new trade routes, negotiated mineral rights with the Centaurian Federation, and somehow persuaded the usually hostile Klingarian Empire to provide emergency supplies. Millions of Valorian civilians owed their lives to agreements she had crafted in conference rooms across the galaxy. Thak's hands shook as he gently set down the beacon, suddenly terrified of damaging equipment that could summon fleets or topple governments. The device continued to pulse with soft light, its quantum processors no doubt already recording everything that had transpired. The cargo hold fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Outside, the crowd of witnesses continued to grow, their recording devices capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming a diplomatic catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. Commander Lee Minna stood among her scattered belongings, surrounded by the evidence of her true identity, and waited to see how deep a hole the two officers were prepared to dig for themselves and their entire species. The first recording hit the galactic networks within 23 minutes of the confrontation's end. A Mantari trader had live-streamed the entire encounter to his species' equivalent of social media, where it was immediately shared across thousands of worlds. Within the first hour, 17 different versions of the footage were trending on platforms used by dozens of civilizations. The quantum communication arrays of New Geneva Station blazed with unprecedented traffic as news of the incident spread, faster than light itself. Emergency diplomatic channels, normally reserved for declarations of war or natural disasters, carried urgent messages between homeworlds across the galaxy. On the Valorian homeworld of Rigel Prime, Ambassador Kethvar was enjoying his morning meal when his communication console erupted with incoming priority signals. The first call came from the Terran Embassy, followed immediately by the Centaurian Trade Consortium, then the Andromedian Council, and 3 other major powers in rapid succession. "Ambassador," his aide whispered urgently. "You need to see this immediately." The holographic display showed the footage from New Geneva Station, his people's security officers destroying the belongings of someone they now knew was the most respected human diplomat in the galaxy. Kethvar's scaled face turned pale as he watched Commander Lee Minna maintain her dignity while his species representatives acted like common thugs. His communication device chimed again. This time it was Chancellor Veltar of the Centaurian Federation, her forearms gesturing angrily as she spoke. "Ambassador, is this how Valorians honor diplomatic immunity? Commander Lee personally negotiated the mining rights that feed our people." Before Kethvar could respond, another signal arrived from the Andromedian Consortium, then the Felinian Trade Guild. Within 30 minutes, representatives from 12 different species had contacted him, each expressing shock, disappointment, and, in some cases, outright fury. Back on New Geneva Station, Station Commander Park Ji-woo received the alert while reviewing quarterly shipping reports. A human with Korean heritage like Minna, he felt personal shame watching the footage of his station's security forces humiliating one of his people's most distinguished citizens. He immediately dispatched his personal security detail to Bay 47, but by then the damage was done. Commander Lee stood in her ransacked quarters, surrounded by broken belongings and scattered diplomatic equipment, while curious aliens peered through the airlock at the aftermath. "Commander," Park Ji-woo said, as he personally arrived at the scene, his voice heavy with mortification, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for what has happened here. This is completely unacceptable and there will be immediate consequences." Minna looked up from gathering the pieces of her shattered crystal sculpture from Vega. Her expression remained controlled, but Park could see the carefully contained anger in her eyes. "Station Commander, I appreciate your response, but this incident goes far beyond station security protocols." "I understand completely," Park replied. "I've already contacted the Terran Embassy and filed an emergency report with the Galactic Council. Those officers will face the full consequences of their actions." Within 6 hours, the political earthquake began in earnest. The Terran Federation's Trade Council issued an immediate suspension of all ongoing negotiations with the Valorian Empire, including a massive starship construction contract worth billions of credits. The official statement was diplomatic but clear. "Until this matter is resolved to our satisfaction, we cannot continue business as usual." The Centaurian Federation followed suit within another hour. Their announcement was less diplomatic. "We find the treatment of Commander Lee Minna to be inconsistent with civilized behavior between allied species." Their suspension included medical supply shipments that several Valorian colonies depended on for survival. By the end of the standard galactic day, 3 more major powers had announced they were reviewing their relationships with the Valorian Empire. The Andromedian Consortium recalled their trade envoy. The Felinian Guild postponed technology transfers worth trillions of credits. Even the usually neutral Arcturian Collective issued a statement expressing deep concern about Valorian conduct. The Valorian stock exchange plummeted as investors realized the economic implications. Entire sectors of their economy depended on the relationships that Commander Lee had helped establish. Mining operations, agriculture, manufacturing, all relied on trade agreements she had negotiated or facilitated. Officers Thak and Grex found themselves in detention within hours, their careers and lives in ruins. When Valorian Captain Mordak arrived to personally oversee their arrest, his fury was barely contained. 30 years, he growled, his voice echoing through the detention cell as security guards led the disgraced officers away in energy restraints. 30 years of diplomatic progress, and you nearly destroyed it all because you couldn't look past your prejudices. Thak tried to speak, but Mordak cut him off with a snarl. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Commander Lee single-handedly prevented 3 wars that would have cost millions of lives. She's the reason our colonies eat. Our children have medicine, our economy functions in the modern galaxy." "We were just doing our jobs," Grex began weakly. "Your job was to serve and protect, not to assault a diplomatic envoy." Mordak's voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades trying to rebuild his species' reputation. You've made us look like the savage reptiles our enemies claim we are. The formal charges were devastating. Violation of diplomatic immunity, destruction of official property, conduct unbecoming a peace officer, criminal intimidation, and abuse of authority. Each charge carried severe penalties under both station law and interstellar treaty. As news feeds across the galaxy continued to replay the footage, public opinion crystallized around a simple narrative. Two racist officers had targeted a young woman because of her species and appearance, never bothering to discover they were attacking one of the galaxy's most important peacemakers. The incident became a symbol of everything wrong with prejudice and profiling, broadcast to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. And at the IMOA center of it all sat Commander Lee Minna, quietly filing her official report, while the political universe shifted around her actions. The consequences were only beginning to unfold.